McNair gives it to George, running right up the middle. Touchdown! Titans! There are no flags on the field! It's a miracle!
Safety, now you're one-on-one with it.
Shows why he's the man. In trouble. Sack!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, Titan Nation. How's everyone doing as the head coach frenzy begins, or it still continues? As I think Mike's having his own. I think you have an interview with the Titans, right? Later on today. Apparently, it seems
Yeah. I think 3 o'clock, right?
at 3 o'clock.
Uh,
Oh, we have to move it. Yeah, it seems like that's like the trend with everything right now. A lot of I think at one point I think there was like 11 candidates for head coaching for the Tennessee Titans, and we're gonna break it down. Obviously, I have my buddy here, Mike, with us to break it down. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, doing good. Yeah, enjoying not being frozen in. So it's I I love Nashville, but yeah, the weather trade has been good so far.
Exactly. So hopefully everyone in Nashville keeps safe and warm as we kind of dive into the coaching spots. From the top of your head right now, obviously you knew Rand Carthon was going to kind of shake things up. He was going to, put his guys in there. Uh, from what you've seen right now in the news and stuff, is there any surprise candidates in your opinion?
Um, I mean, I guess there's some surprise. I mean, I understand Dan Quinn, kind of the interest there. He's had really good defenses. He's been a head coach before with some success in Atlanta. He had a pretty decent run there.
Mhm.
Um, I get that, but also it just feels like you wanted that guy, you had that guy in the building, right? Like, I mean, that feels like Mike Vrabel's leftovers. So there's some of those things that are surprised, but again, like I feel like my approach would be talk to everybody who's worth talking to, everybody that you have somewhat of an interest in, or you think you could have interest in. Talk to them. There's nothing that can be nothing that you can lose from talking to somebody about the position and like finding out what their approach would be. Maybe they have a great idea that you want to borrow,
Hey, and you know what? I think that might be something that's obviously we've seen. That's you see like the news, like this person's going in for a virtual interview. This person, and you're like, man, how many people are we interviewing? But I mean, that makes a solid point on, hey, maybe there's certain stuff that like Amy Armstrong said, they want to be patient with the process, but they might have their guy, but they're open to suggestions and other things. So you never know. So
Yeah, or even stuff like, I mean, say, hey, Dan Quinn, like if we were to hire you, who would you put on your staff? Like, what would be the coaches that you would want to work with, on your staff? And he's going to give you a list of names. Maybe that's going to give you a coach that wasn't really on your radar that, you go hire Brian Callahan, for example, and say, hey, Brian, Dan Quinn really likes this guy. What do you know about him? Can we find out more? Like, that it's just a treasure trove of information every time you talk to one of these guys that you get to kind of open up and do with what you want, even if you don't really necessarily see them as the next head coach of the Titans.
and
So
that's
I think
that's the
some of
best
those
approach. I think that's
oh,
the
that's
best
my
approach,
opinion.
to be honest with you. I think
Yeah.
so. Just going like that and kind of, hey, maybe you get more information about another, coach that you didn't know before, and they might have. And like I said, always open for suggestions, and I think that's good. And especially being ahead, it's such a. I think for the Tennessee Titans, it's such a important part is to hit on head coaching, to hit on offensive line coach, and hit on offensive coordinator defense, just because of the things that happened with us in the past, especially if we want to be, I guess, competitive within a couple of years and not try to completely have a rebuild. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's where we're all like kind of hoping and praying is that we don't completely go into a rebuild. We understand that it's a rebuild, sort of, but if you put the right pieces into place, things might be a little bit smoother ride, I think, you know?
Yeah, and there's been some examples of that, right? Like, I mean, the Texans are a good example. Like, they were a 3-win team a year ago, didn't have a quarterback, just fired another head coach,
Yeah.
and here they are, into the divisional round of the playoffs this year with a rookie head coach, rookie quarterback. It doesn't take a ton to break your way. Like even the Rams were like a 5-win team the year before this year, and then they turn it around because they hit on Kobe Turner, they hit on Puka Nakua, they hit on several of these guys in the draft that they took, and all of a sudden, like, hey, the team's competitive again. So it doesn't take a ton in the NFL. Like the margins are so small. Like even looking at this year, that it's bad as the year was for the Titans, there's a few of those games where you flip a coin the other way, and like, hey, maybe it's the Titans that are in the playoffs right now, and not talking about a new head coach and a top 7 pick in the draft and all that. So
And
it's
that's
the
what we're
margins
hoping
are
for,
so
right?
small.
That's what
Yeah,
we're hoping for. Are you giving us hope, Mike? Are you giving us hope that we could be that in a couple
you
years?
got to. Hey, if Will Levis is the guy, that's the big thing, right? Like if Will Levis is the guy, everything else I think can be fixed pretty quickly. Like it's just finding a quarterback, finding a coach are the two hardest things. So if you got a quarterback, then you get the coaching hire right, maybe you can be on your way.
All right. Well, let's dive into the head coaching spot. As you know, like I said, I think there was like 11 candidates. Um, what, in your opinion, is like the top maybe three in your eyes that you'd say like that the Titans interviewed? You're like, okay, that guy could be it. That could be the next head coach.
The top three as far as most likely that I think they
Yeah.
are going. I mean, I think initially I would gravitate towards the guys that they've requested second interviews with, which are currently Brian Callahan, who to me like has a big star next to him, right? Like because he was the first guy they requested, he was the first guy they requested for a second interview, and he's a guy that makes a ton of sense for them to me. But to me, Brian Callahan, and then Thomas Brown, and Dan Quinn. I mean, those are the three right now that we know have second interviews lined up with the Titans. So those are the names of interest to me at the moment. And we'll see if they reach back out for a second round. Like we've already heard the Falcons are reportedly asking for Mike McDonald a second time. We haven't heard that request come out from the Titans yet, so I don't know if that means it hasn't happened or it just hasn't been reported. There's all that stuff, but my initial thought gravitates towards guys that we know have made it to the second round
Mhm.
of interviews. Kind of, I'd put at the top of the list for right now as far as most likely.
And talking about the guys that are, second interviews and stuff. I know we've talked about Dan Quinn, and I've made jokes about it. I think everyone's made jokes about it. Nobody wants Dan Quinn, and it kind of, the last thing you remember from that is, that horrendous game.
Yeah,
But I mean, that's the lasting expression. Obviously, like that's what you give off. You think Dan Quinn, you think of the Cowboys game and stuff. But
right.
like you said before, he's had some success. He's been in that spot of being a head coach. I never wanted I didn't want like a rookie head coach, to be honest. I wanted someone with some experience already. I think it would be really good for the Titans. But you have one like Dan Quinn. Do you think at all does that tarnish his reputation a little bit? The last game of the Cowboys, giving up the most in the playoff. I mean,
I mean, it's not like the momentum you want to head into the search with, but I'll say that I don't that one game should not totally change your
to
opinion of
find
anything.
someone. Yeah.
Like, I mean, that it could just be a bad game. Like we've seen Andy Reid come and put up 3 points against the Titans and look like his offense just looked like a complete mess
Yeah.
against this team. It doesn't mean that Andy Reid sucks as a coach, right? Like if that had been the last game before he was being interviewed or something like that, like
You
you
get
shouldn't allow that to decide, well, he's just bad.
yeah.
So I do think Dan Quinn's a good defensive coordinator. I think he could be a good defensive head coach. My preference is from the jump after they fired Vrabel, and
Mhm.
it's complicated in the fact that I am a believer that the defensive head coach setup can work for teams
Okay,
in
so
modern.
you're on that train, not in a bad way. I'm just okay. So
I,
you're all about the defensive mind head
I,
coach. Okay,
I think it can work.
okay,
That said, I prefer to have an offensive coach for the Titans because to me, you just fired a defensive head coach.
yeah. Why? Why?
And I think that part of the reasoning has to be that like you want the offense to go in a certain direction, and the guy that's going to control the offense needs to be the head coach if that's going to be the case, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
to me, it makes more sense to go head coach from the offensive side of the ball. You know, if you were going to make the move with Vrabel, which they did, obviously, I think that makes more sense to go the other way and bring in an offensive coach. So I prefer an offensive coach, even over like to me. If you were just to say, I don't care offense or defense, who's the best candidate out of all the coaches currently? I think it's either like Ben Johnson or Mike McDonald. I think Mike McDonald may be the best candidate in the entire coaching field
Overall, just
overall,
overall, yeah.
but he's not an offensive guy. So like I feel like that does knock him down a peg for me. Just with the Titans specifically, because I if it was anyone else, you
They
know,
would,
especially a team like LA with an established quarterback, throw Mike McDonald in there, I think they would be killer. Like I think him running the defense, like because we've seen it. Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, you know, Ben Roethlisberger and Mike Tomlin, Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll, you know, John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson. You don't have to have like the offensive whiz kid if you have an established quarterback. So like I think if you could pair those together and you can make that defense work with the offense, then you have something going. But for
absolutely.
me,
Mhm.
offense for the Titans.
So as you were saying, you wanted offensive. I mean, if you think about it, right? Brian Callahan is another one who's was an offensive. Well, he was an offense. He was offensive coordinator for the Bengals, right?
Yeah,
Look what he did with that team when Joe Burrow went down. You know,
yeah, and I think for me, Callahan is you know I liked Ben Johnson starting
Mhm.
out, as I think a lot of people did. Um, he just does not seem like he's interested in the Titans job for whatever reason. Like he was requested to interview. We know that was reported. He interviewed with a bunch of other teams. He did not interview with the Titans. So to me, that says he
Hey,
doesn't want to be here, which is fine. Like you know, everyone will have their preferences. But of the coaches that remain like actual candidates. I to me, Brian Callahan is my favorite. Like he's my number one. I think he's done a phenomenal job, obviously in Cincy. Everything you read about coming out of Cincy is extremely positive with him. He's come from a coaching family. Obviously, his dad, Bill Callahan, great offensive line coach, former NFL head coach, has been around the league for forever. So this guy was brought up in coaching. He made a huge impression on Peyton Manning, even at a very, very young age. I think he was a quality control coach for the Broncos, but spent a lot of time with Manning during the you know tail end of Peyton's career there in Denver. Everything you hear about him, Matt Stafford had glowing things to say about him from their time together in Detroit. So did Dan Orlovsky, for what it's worth. Like he's been a big champion of his. Everyone who comes across him
so you're
loves
saying if we have the quarterback, then this guy would fit, right? Am I saying?
yeah, he is a quarterback developer. I think that's something that goes as a positive for him on his resume. Everywhere he's been, quarterbacks have played well. Quarterbacks have gotten better. You know, even his one season with the Raiders, I think Carr had a good year that season as well. So it is a proven track record to me. He's been around for a long time. He's had some stability. Like he's been with the Bengals for 5 years, right? Like he has grown up in that system alongside Zach Taylor, where they've had a ton of offensive success, obviously. And look, Zach Taylor's the play caller there. Like, so he is the head of the offense. But to me, like Callahan's obviously learned a lot during that time there, and he's picked up a lot of things. And if you talk to people in Cincinnati or around the Bengals, and hear what they have to say about Callahan. Like they believe he is going to be a really good head coach. So, like to me, everything about this guy's background, his presence, the way he carries himself, screams head coach. I think he's going to be a good one, and I hope the Titans are the ones that make him a good one.
Hopefully, because that's what they want. They want culture change, right? They want a change in everything. And then that's one thing that I don't kind of break my like, I don't go too crazy trying to dissect and oh, this guy went this way, this guy went, oh, who because at the end of the day, as long as the coach that we bring is veteran, can change the culture, can change because that's what the Tennessee Titans want to do. That's what apparently that's what it is, right? Is change the culture of that offense. Because damn, that
Yeah.
offense is rough. So
And,
hopefully something happens like that. Now
yeah.
talking about the offense, what about the offensive coordinator again? Big. I mean, you had Kelly. It did okay, right? He did okay. I mean, red zone was a problem, but other than that, once he got to the red zone, he kind of had like a writer's block. He couldn't figure it out. I don't know what was wrong with him. But other than that, I mean, he had his moments, right? What do you think
Yeah.
about Kelly and what's next for the offensive coordinator?
I mean, I think they've got to go another direction from Kelly. I think they didn't have enough success. Like you said, it wasn't all a disaster. I thought Kelly did some good things here, but they didn't have enough success to justify like
Yeah,
continuing in
to
that
keep him. Yeah,
direction.
yeah,
So to me, like, obviously if you bring in an offensive head coach, that's going to kind of be the top guy on the offense. And actually, interestingly enough, I just tweeted out that list of the kind of my dream scenario right now is Callahan head coach and then Thomas Brown as OC. That's right, exactly.
I did my.
And in Bucker Ising replied back that saying like the first two he thought was like a real possibility at this point. So and in it, look, they've done it before where they've interviewed a candidate for a
Mhm,
head coaching job that they really intended to be the offensive coordinator. That could be what they are doing with Thomas Brown,
mhm.
who doesn't have direct ties to Brian Callahan, but they both come from the McVay tree, right? So like Zach Taylor comes from McVay, who runs that similar style offense. That's where Brian Callahan's been the last 5 years. And Callahan also goes back to Gary Kubiak in Denver, who is a part of that McVay, Shanahan, like the West Coast offense crew,
There you
basically,
go.
that runs the
And
NFL.
Carthon,
Yeah,
exactly. All tied
exactly. So
together.
there's a lot of ties together in that sense. And then Thomas Brown spent several years with McVay before he went to Carolina. People judge him off of that Carolina year super harshly, which to me, like, look, Frank Reich was running that offense. Thomas Brown obviously like didn't have a great year himself, like just because nobody in Carolina had a great year. But it was to me a system like set up to fail just because they did not have the right people in place. There is apparently all sorts of chaos behind the scenes as far as like split loyalties between like Reich and the GM and the owner and people talking to the owner behind people's back and like nobody there's you talk about like you just talked about culture. Apparently the culture in Carolina was a problem last year. So
Yeah.
and that feeds into the results on the field. It can't not feed into the results on the field. So to me, like I think people overjudge Brown based on 1 year in Carolina. Whereas if you look at his track record and with the Rams, and look, like he was a running backs coach for McVay for most of his time there, but he was also an assistant head coach,
Mhm.
which like people look at running backs coach. Well, oh, how did their running backs do?
Mhm.
That's really not like what you need to look at. What you need to listen to is like what do people actually say about these guys? Like what does Sean McVay actually think about this guy? And Sean McVay raves about Thomas Brown. He loves Thomas Brown. He made him an assistant head coach for a reason. That's a pretty
Yeah,
big title
yeah,
when you get it as a position coach. So look, I think Thomas Brown is a rising star as a coach in the NFL, and I would be more than happy to see him as an offensive coordinator under Brian Callahan, who'd still be leading the offense.
uh-huh.
And whoever they want to have call plays between those two don't really care. Like whoever they feel like sets them up better for success can do it. But I think that would be a good hire for an offensive coordinator for Callahan specifically.
Definitely. And you said it yourself, about it moving forward as changing the culture. I mean, you said the Titans need to move on because of Kelly's not of the success. He didn't have too much success. Now we have obviously we might have most likely Derrick Henry leaving changes the whole offensive scheme. To be honest with you, it changes their a whole different approach. Yeah, we have Tajay Spears, but he's nothing like Derrick Henry. Different running back, different styles, changes the offense completely. And I think that's what they want to go. They want to go more towards like throwing, which everyone I think wanted to do at one point, but uh, we'll see what happens with that. Let's talk a little bit about talking about throwing the ball. We need people to protect the ball. We need a coach who can coach the offensive line. What about offensive line coach? And I know Mike Munchak was first. I was really surprised because there's names always thrown out, but then they said that he got interviewed and he said that he would be happy to come back and stuff, which is crazy. But
Yeah.
he's with the Steelers, right? Is he?
No, well, not currently. No, he took, I think it was like a couple years off of football. Basically, he had a knee replacement or something like that, and just for his health, he kind of
Okay.
took some time off. So he was last with Denver,
Oh, that's right. He was
with their offensive line coach, and but he's been out of the league the last, I think, 2 years now.
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, PK talked to him. He says he's interested in getting back into coaching. He would be
No,
happy to come back to Nashville and work with the Titans again. It wouldn't be
not the
a
head coach.
awkward situation, right? Yeah, not as head coach. He would be specifically as offensive line coach, which I think is what he's great at. He has
Great.
done a phenomenal job everywhere he's been doing that. So to me, like if you can get Munch back, because I do think there is something about him being here. I think that is especially special, right? Like just because his history with the organization, all that stuff has to matter.
Mhm.
So I would love to see him back. He's a great coach. He would fix a lot of their offensive line problems. I have almost zero doubt about that because everywhere he's been, the offensive line has gotten better. The same goes for Brian Callahan's dad, Bill Callahan, though. And I don't know what his contractual situation is in Cleveland. I don't know if they've ever talked about the possibility of Brian becoming a head coach one day and whether he would even want to have his dad on his staff. Like that's almost kind of awkward, right? Like,
Yeah.
can you really get on to your dad about like, hey, the offensive line sucking ass today?
Come on,
Like,
Dad, get it
what are
together.
we
I'm tired
doing?
of your ass.
Or like God forbid, like ever came to a situation where like his dad was performing so poorly that the owner's like, hey, you gotta get your dad out of here. Now you gotta go fire your dad. Like there's a lot of like it's not a slam dunk that necessarily like family wants to work together all the
Yeah.
time. So I don't know what that situation would be. It could be that they'd love to do that, and that's always been a dream, and they've always talked about this day, and that the Browns would either not have him under contract or would let him out to go do
Or
that.
Eric could go completely sideways.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like extreme polar ends of the spectrum where you could land on that. But if he wanted to bring his dad, I'm all for it. All I ask is that the Titans, whoever gets hired as the head coach, bring an kick-ass, experienced offensive coordinator in here, or on offensive line coach in here, and fix the offensive line problem. Like it's got to be
Probably the most.
players too, because I don't think it's just a coaching thing. I don't think like Mike Munchak would have turned Jalen Duncan into Trent Williams or anything like that last year. But
Oh
it's
man.
got to be both. You got to have the coaching and you got to have the players to go with it. So throw all of the resources you can at fixing the offensive line this offseason.
Yeah, that's probably the most important thing. Don't get me wrong. Head coach, I get it, but offensive line, man, oh man, what they got some work. Pay them whatever they need to fix this thing because it's gonna be rough for them. And
Absolutely.
it's they're gonna just gonna show you
And
a clip. They're gonna be like, this is what you gotta work with. And then
and
okay.
And the benefit of both Callahan and Munchak is they have head coaching experience too, right? So like you're gonna hire like theoretically a rookie head coach. You bring him in, you give him a head coach on the staff too that he
Balances
can
them out, right?
bounce some things off of. Yeah. So I love both of those fits either way, like whichever way they work.
All right, last subject before I let you go, man. Let's talk about defensive coordinator. Now, our defense, to be honest with you, this year what it wasn't bad.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't bad compared to the offense, obviously, and vice versa. We can, complain about like the defense was on the field for more than the offense. That's why and defense you get tired. I think the defense on that part, I think we're okay. Obviously we need some help, safety position, linebacker position, okay, quarterback. But the line, I think we're decent. But
Yeah.
what do you think about the defensive coordinator, man?
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't think they did a bad job coaching on defense this past year. I think the defense was pretty. And look, people will complain about Vrabel and Bowen and stuff like
Mhm.
that, but especially now that they've been fired, whatever.
Yeah.
But you go back, like, even I think it was 2 off seasons ago, so not this past off season, but the year before.
Mhm.
And the Athletic Football Show, Robert Mays and Nate Tice, I think they do a phenomenal job. It's one of my favorite podcasts to listen to. They talk every offseason about, like, they talk to different coaches around the league. They all have connections, like, to various coaching staffs at different levels in the organization. They always ask them, who are you watching this offseason to try to pick up things, to try to learn from, to try, like, who's got a creative scheme that, like, you're trying to borrow from. And
Mhm.
they said 2 years ago, almost to a man, every coach they talked to was talking about the Titans and Mike Vrabel and Shane Bowen and what they're doing with that defense in Tennessee as being one of the most progressive, forward-thinking, innovative defenses in the league. So to me, I don't think that this was a badly coached defense. I think they suffered from a problem of they didn't have any corners who were any good,
Injuries.
and and they had a bunch of injuries, and they didn't have, like, I like Harold Landry a lot. I think Arden Key is pretty good, but they don't have, like, a Bosa or a Miles Garrett
Yeah.
or one of those, or a Watt. They don't have one of those level guys to build their defense around,
Mhm.
which makes things a lot harder. So I think it was a personnel problem to some degree on defense. Now, maybe they could find somebody better. I think Ajiro Evero, again from the Panthers, which I know, like, trying to rob all the coaches from the Panthers and a great look right after last year. But I think
Mike,
Evero is an
are you
excellent.
secretly a Panthers fan? You like the Carolina Panthers, man? I don't know.
I liked their coaching staff when they put it together, like, last
Okay.
year, and so, like, I still like those guys. I mean, one season of bad results in
Yeah,
what
you
sounds
can't.
like a
You're right.
horrible situation. I'm not gonna, like, throw out all my previously held notions about him. But I think Evero would be a great choice. I think he's a young, up and coming defensive coordinator. Had a tremendous success in Denver before ending up in Carolina. But if not him, I think, like, Jim Leonard, who is currently, like, I think he's like a analyst for Illinois or something like that. But he was the Wisconsin defensive coordinator for several years. Extremely innovative, young, forward thinking kind of guy. Chris Shula, passing game coordinator for the Rams. Uh, really big improvement on defense for them this year, and he was a big part of it, from what I understand. And then Leslie Frazier, if you want to go kind of more of the old head, like, has some skins on the wall, you can leave the defense to him and not have to worry about it. I do like him as especially a partner with a young coach. I think that could be a good fit. So I like those 4 names on the defensive coordinator side of things.
All right. Well, I think within how long do you think they'll start announcing? Will you think head coach will be the first one, and they'll start knocking them out, or what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they'll definitely bring on the head coach first and then let him kind of hire his staff how he sees fit. They may have some ideas, like I mentioned, they may be interviewing, certain guys with the slant of, hey, we'd like you to be paired with this guy as your OC or whatever. But I think whoever they hire as head coach will get final say on his staff. And I, I guess I wouldn't be surprised if we saw them make a hire this week, until we see, like, a request go out for a Mike McDonald or an Aaron Glenn, who, they had initial interviews with,
Mhm.
but they won't be able to interview now until next week because, they're still in the playoffs. Until we see a request go out for a second interview for those guys, I think I'm leaning towards the hire gets made this week.
Okay.
And then we start to see staff fill out from there, but we'll see.
Well, hopefully it's not today or tomorrow because then the video kind of goes to shit. But hopefully we'll
Yeah.
see. But you know what? Hopefully, hopefully, yeah. Hopefully they can get. I think the sooner the better. Not only for the candidates, but just to start getting familiarized, get their system, meeting the players, the facility, all that, and start gearing up for the year. So we'll
Yeah,
see. But
absolutely.
hey, Mike, man, it's always a blast to have you on, man. Thank you so much for your time and your knowledge in football, man. And hopefully, we'll get you back on, talk some more Titans. Maybe we'll talk about the Callahan coming to the head coaching skill. You never know.
Yeah, I hope so. That'd be fun. That'd be fun.
All right, man. Thank you so much, brother.